A wheelchair, a forgotten alley, and a miracle nobody saw coming. Welcome to our story corner, where every day brings a new journey to the heart. We're so glad you're here. If you enjoyed today's tale, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss tomorrow's special story. A moment of magic you won't want to miss. Thank you for being part of our storytelling. Family, until then, stay kind, stay curious, and keep dreaming. Ethan Blake had walked the streets of downtown Chicago more times than he could count, but never like this. Never with the steady creak of wheelchair wheels beside his polished leather shoes. Never with a silence so heavy it seemed to crush the very air he breathed. His daughter Madison sat quietly in her chair, wrapped in a soft navy blanket that covered her small, motionless legs. Her blonde hair framed her downcast face, and her hands clutched the edges of the chair as if letting go might make everything worse. She was only 9 years old, but in that moment she looked much older, as if hope itself had drained away. Ethan's heart ached. It had been nearly 2 years since the accident, the one no amount of money, apologies, or prayers could undo. Every specialist, every therapist, every so-called miracle worker had given him the same diagnosis: permanent spinal damage. They may live a full life, they would tell him gently, but she will never walk again. It was a sentence Ethan heard over and over, a cruel chorus that no amount of dollars or desperate wishes could drown out. His fortune could buy private jets, penthouse suites, and the finest medical care in America, but it couldn't buy a second chance for Madison. He was just turning the corner of a narrow alley, pushing Madison's wheelchair with careful hands, when he heard the voice, young, clear, and startling. "Sir, I know how to help your daughter walk again." Ethan froze mid-step. His fingers tightened around the handles of the chair. He turned slowly, expecting some scam artist or worse. But what he found was a barefoot boy, no older than 10, standing near a cracked brick wall. The boy was dark-skinned and thin, wearing an oversized jacket that hung off his narrow frame. His jeans were torn at the knees and the soles of his feet were caked in city dust. Yet despite his appearance, the boy's voice was steady, calm in a way that made Ethan pause. "What did you say?" Ethan asked, his voice low with suspicion. "I said I can help your daughter," the boy repeated. "My name's Jonah. I live near the old train station." Ethan blinked, trying to make sense of the situation. "Is this some kind of joke? Who put you up to this?" "No one," Jonah said, stepping a little closer. "I saw you yesterday. I saw her. I waited here today because I thought maybe you'd come back." Ethan's first instinct was to walk away, to push Madison back toward the familiar world of polished hospitals and sterile hallways. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the steadiness in Jonah's eyes. Maybe it was the faintest flicker of hope in Madison's gaze as she lifted her head for the first time all afternoon. "Please, Dad," Madison whispered. "Can we just listen?" Ethan knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "One step at a time, kiddo," he said softly. He turned back to Jonah. "All right, son. Show me." Jonah didn't wait for Ethan's approval. He simply turned and started walking, his bare feet making soft slapping sounds against the cracked pavement. Ethan hesitated for a split second, glancing down at Madison, who gave him the tiniest nod, a signal of quiet bravery he hadn't seen from her in months. Tightening his grip on the wheelchair handles, Ethan pushed forward, following the strange boy into the maze of forgotten streets beyond the city's gleaming skyscrapers. The further they walked, the rougher the surroundings became. Abandoned parking lots stretched like scars across the land. Graffiti screamed from crumbling brick walls. Weeds taller than Madison's wheelchair swayed along the edges of the broken sidewalks. Twice, Ethan almost stopped and turned back. Every logical bone in his body told him this was reckless. He didn't know this boy. He didn't know where they were going. And yet each time he thought about quitting, he caught sight of Jonah glancing back at them, a silent promise in his eyes that somehow it would all be worth it. After nearly 20 minutes of weaving through back alleys and dirt paths, Jonah led them to the edge of an overgrown trailhead. The trees here were thick, wild, and knotted with vines. The path itself was barely wide enough for Madison's wheelchair to squeeze through. "You want me to take her through there?" Ethan asked, his voice low, tense. Jonah didn't flinch. "If you want her to walk again, yes." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. This was insane. He was a man of contracts, of negotiations, of guarantees, not fairy tales in the moor, woods led by barefoot kids. And yet Madison was looking up at him with those wide, pleading eyes. "Okay," he muttered, "but the first sign of trouble, we're turning around." "Got it?" "Got it," Jonah said simply. They pushed into the trees, the trail twisted and narrowed, roots clawing at the wheels, low-hanging branches snagging Ethan's jacket. Madison winced every time the chair bumped over a rock or tangle, but she never asked to stop. Her hands gripped the armrests tighter, her eyes locked forward, determined. The air changed as they went deeper, cooler, damper, tinged with the earthy scent of moss and rain-soaked wood. Sunlight barely pierced through the thick canopy overhead, casting the world into a greenish twilight. Just when Ethan was about to snap and demand they turn around, Jonah came to an abrupt stop. "There," Jonah said, pointing ahead. At first, Ethan saw nothing, just more tangled underbrush. But then, through the shadows, he spotted it. A small wooden cabin, tucked between two massive oak trees. Its walls were built from weathered timber. Its windows glowed faintly, as if a fire had just been lit inside. The place looked like something torn from an old storybook, impossibly out of place in the middle of a forgotten forest. An old woman stood on the porch, her silver hair braided with tiny bits of bark and string. She watched them with calm, knowing eyes, as if she had been expecting them all along. Jonah turned to Ethan and Madison, his voice steady. "This is her," he said, "the one who helped me, the one who might help her too." Ethan's heart pounded hard against his ribs. He wasn't sure if he was more terrified or hopeful. Either way, there was no turning back now. The woman on the porch didn't speak right away. She simply watched them approach, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her gaze steady but somehow kind. Ethan hesitated at the bottom of the creaking wooden steps, tightening his grip on Madison's wheelchair handles. Everything about this felt unreal. The hidden cabin, the boy who claimed miracles were real, the old woman who seemed untouched by the world's cynicism. But Madison was leaning forward now, her small hands trembling with something Ethan hadn't seen in years. Hope. The woman stepped down slowly, her bare feet making soft sounds against the worn boards. She crouched beside Madison, her silver braid falling over her shoulder. "Child," she said, her voice low and smooth like a river, "may I touch your knees?" Ethan stiffened. Every instinct screamed to say no, to pull Madison back into the safe clinical world he understood. But Madison looked at him, eyes wide and pleading. He gave the smallest nod. The woman reached out, placing both hands gently over Madison's blanketed legs. Her fingers were rough, calloused, warm. She closed her eyes and began to hum, a sound so low and ancient it made the hairs on Ethan's arms stand up. For a long moment, nothing happened. And then Madison gasped. "I felt that," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan dropped to one knee instantly. "Felt what? Where?" "My toes," Madison said, tears springing to her eyes. "It's like they woke up." The woman opened her eyes slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Her spine isn't broken," she said softly. "It's frozen. Frozen by fear, by sadness, by the weight of believing she could never stand again." "That's not what the doctors said," Ethan muttered under his breath, almost angry at how badly he wanted her to be right. "Doctors heal bodies," the woman replied, not unkindly. "But sometimes it's the heart that needs healing first." Jonah stepped forward quietly. "Can she try?" he asked. The woman turned to Madison. "Only if you want to, sweetheart," No one will force you. Madison nodded, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Very gently, the woman rolled Madison's wheelchair back and reached for her hands. Ethan held his breath as Madison shifted forward, her sneakers scraping softly against the porch floor. Her legs shook violently. Ethan instinctively moved to grab her, but the woman raised one hand, a silent command to wait, and then, unbelievably, Madison's right foot moved. Just a few inches, just enough to plant herself a little stronger. Then the left foot. She was standing. She was standing. Tears poured freely down Ethan's face as he knelt. Arms wide open, terrified she might fall, yet terrified to touch her and break the spell. Madison's body wobbled like a newborn foal, but her face was fierce. "I'm standing, Daddy," she cried, laughing and sobbing at once. "I'm really standing." Ethan choked on a sob and reached for her, pulling her into his arms before gravity could claim her again. "You're standing, baby," he whispered into her hair. "You're standing." Behind them, Jonah and the old woman watched silently. No applause, no fanfare. Just a deep, knowing peace. Ethan sat on the worn wooden steps, still cradling Madison as she laughed and cried against his chest. It felt like breathing for the first time in years, like the impossible had cracked open right in front of him. But even through the tidal wave of relief, something gnawed at him. He needed to understand. He needed to know how. He looked up at Jonah, who was standing quietly to the side, hands stuffed into the pockets of his oversized jacket, his bare toes curling slightly against the porch floor. "Jonah," Ethan said, his voice raw with emotion. "How did you know? How did you know she could walk again?" Jonah shifted uncomfortably, kicking a small pebble off the edge of the step. For a moment, it looked like he wasn't going to answer. Then, slowly, he sat down, pulling his knees up to his chest. "I didn't know," he said finally. "Not for sure. I just remembered." "Remembered what?" Ethan asked. Jonah stared off into the woods, his voice low, almost a whisper. "My grandma. She wasn't a doctor. She didn't go to college, but she understood people. The way they break, the way they hide pain." He paused, picking at a thread in his jacket sleeve. "When I was little, my right foot was twisted. Clubfoot, they called it. Kids at school used. To laugh, throw stuff at me, I couldn't run. Couldn't even walk right. My mom, she didn't stick around long after I was born. Grandma raised me." Ethan listened, heart heavy. "One day," Jonah continued, "after I came home crying again, she sat me down on the porch. She put her hands on my foot just like she did with Madison's knees. She didn't say much, just closed her eyes and started humming this old song, like the trees were singing through her." Jonah's eyes glistened in the dim light, and after a while she whispered something, in a language I didn't know. Maybe something she learned from her own mother, or someone before that. And then she told me to stand up. He looked over at Ethan, his expression vulnerable and proud all at once. I did, and for the first time I didn't fall. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words settle into his bones. "Doctors told her it was a fluke," Jonah said, a sad smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "They said it must have been natural growth, that miracles don't happen. They called her a fraud, said I was lying, tried to put me into the system when she died." He wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve. "I ran instead. I couldn't prove anything. But I knew what she did for me, and I figured maybe I could help. Someone else too, not everyone, not every time, but sometimes." Ethan sat there, stunned, feeling Madison's heartbeat against his chest, feeling the truth of Jonah's words wrap around him tighter than any doctor's diagnosis ever had. Healing wasn't always in machines or medicine. Sometimes it was in a hand reaching out. Sometimes it was in a boy who refused to give up on broken things. And for the first time in a long, long while, Ethan realized maybe miracles weren't about science at all. Maybe they were about belief. The cabin seemed to breathe with them as they sat there, three strangers, now bound by something deeper than words. Ethan finally stood, lifting Madison into his arms. She was light, too light for a 9-year-old, but he held her close as if to anchor both of them to this impossible moment. He turned to Jonah, who was still sitting on the porch, legs crossed, picking absent-mindedly at a splinter in the wood. "Want to help you?" Ethan said. His voice was steady now, fueled by something fiercer than pity. "You don't have to live like this. I can get you out. A home, school, real support. You deserve more than alleyways and abandoned streets." Jonah smiled, a soft, tired smile, and shook his head. "My place is here," he said simply. "In the corners people forget. That's where the ones who hurt the most still believe in small things." Ethan wanted to argue. Every instinct told him he had to do something, but he saw it. The stubborn set of Jonah's jaw, the quiet conviction in his eyes. This was Jonah's choice. Instead, Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, slightly bent and damp from their journey. "If you ever need me," he said, pressing the card into Jonah's hand. "For anything, food, clothes, a way out, you call, day or night." Jonah studied the card for a moment, then tucked it, carefully inside the lining of his coat as if it were made of gold. Madison, still clinging to Ethan's neck, turned and looked at Jonah. "Will I see you again?" she asked softly. Jonah's smile widened just a little. "If you ever forget how to believe," he said, "I'll probably be nearby." Without hesitation, Madison leaned forward and wrapped her arms around him. It was a small hug, but for Jonah, it was everything. A weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lifted right off his shoulders. As the sky above the trees began to shift from gray to a pale, promising blue, Ethan carried Madison back down the trail, her wheelchair left behind, forgotten in the moss and roots. She didn't need it anymore, not completely. 1 week later, Madison stood at the front of her school's auditorium. No braces, no chair, only her. The room was packed with students, teachers, and parents, all watching in stunned silence as Madison walked slowly, carefully, across the stage to receive her award for perseverance. Reporters crowded near the front, flashes of cameras popping like fireworks. One of them leaned forward, shouting over the noise. "Madison, what changed? What helped you walk again?" Madison looked out at the sea of faces, her heart pounding, and smiled. "A boy who believed I could," she said simply. Far across the city, in a different alley filled with peeling posters and forgotten dreams, Jonah sat cross-legged next to a young girl who hadn't spoken a word in months. He didn't push her to talk. He didn't ask her to explain. He just sat beside her and hummed the old song, the one his grandmother used to sing, soft as the wind. Because healing doesn't always begin with medicine. Sometimes it begins with someone who simply refuses to walk away. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we would love to hear from you. Tell us, what part of Madison and Jonah's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever witnessed or even experienced a moment where belief and kindness changed everything? Your stories matter. Your voice matters. Sharing your experiences not only builds a stronger community here, but also reminds someone else out there that they are not alone. Please leave a comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from. It always amazes us to see how these stories connect hearts across oceans and continents. And if you know someone who might need a little reminder to believe again, feel free to share this story with them. We read every comment, and your words often inspire the next stories we bring to life. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay kind, stay brave, and as always, keep believing.